Hi, my name is Keith Cooper of Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to be making some prints on the new Canon PRO-1100. Now, what sort of prints and why am I making a set of prints? Well, one of the things I'm asked about quite often is how do you choose a paper? Now, I'm not going to specifically recommend a paper here, although thanks to PermaJet in the UK for sending me some samples that I can test this on. Doing large A2 prints is not cheap to do if you have to get paper. You don't want to mess these things up. But anyway, this is looking at specifically 5 examples of PermaJet's Heritage range. Now, for people not in the UK, there will be similar papers elsewhere. Have a look at the specs on the PermaJet site and see what you think. But essentially the papers I'm looking at are they are rag-based papers. There is a smooth rag, watercolour rag, one called Museum Heritage, one called Etching Rag, and one a Baryta Rag. Now, the first 4 are very similar other than in surface finish. There are other slight differences, but you'll have to have a look at the specs. I'll put links in the notes to everything for that, so if you want more information. I'm not going to show the printing. I've already got 4 of the 5 printed, and this is a sheet of the Baryta. Now, it's a rag paper, but with a Baryta coating. So whereas the other papers, the rag papers, need using with the matte black, and they're printed on the fine art smooth or fine art rough setting, depending on the paper, this one is printed with the photo black ink. Now, I've made custom profiles for all of these. Now, anyone wanting to experiment, when I do the review for this, all the profiles I've made and other profiling information will be available on request. Just drop me an email if it's stuff of interest to you. Now, this particular paper, it's a Baryta style paper. It's a very nice looking paper, smoothish finish, slight surface texture. But what I'm interested in is, the question I'm asked is, okay, how do you decide which paper to use? Now, I always say if you're new to a printer, start off with something simple. So for this printer here, start off with something like Canon Luster, Canon Gloss if you're interested in gloss, or one of the Canon Fine Art Smooth, Fine Art Rough papers with that. Learn how to use those papers, Canon profiles, and then perhaps you can decide to use other papers. One other note I'd make is that if you have a favourite paper from a different printer, do not automatically expect it to work as well on your new printer. Essentially, you should always choose the printer you're going to use, and then you pick the papers which perform best and which you like the look of. Now, performance-wise, I am not going to go, although I've made profiles for these, I am not going to go into gamut volumes and all that sort of stuff, because it is of precious little use to most people. They are meaningless numbers. It's nice to be able to say, well, this paper has a gamut volume of 837,000, but this one is only 836,000. What? 836,000 what? Lemons? Bananas? It makes, well, as you might tell, I don't like doing stuff by numbers. I use the numbers for my testing, but I'll never directly publish them in reviews and the like, because they lead for a false sense of meaning. Remember that precision in numbers does not equate with accuracy or meaning. So when you see all these numbers about papers saying, well, this one has a gamut volume of X compared to Y on the previous, let's say the PRO-1000, this shows how much better this is, without a large amount of explanatory material, stuff like that is at best useless, at worst misleading. Yeah, I'm quite happy saying that about it. If you really look into the numbers to try and make your decisions, make sure you understand what those numbers really mean and how they were created. the background, the methodology that was used for create all sorts of stuff. Is why I don't bother, because without doing a complete course on colour management and interpreting the results of profiles and things like that, such stuff is meaningless. Now, I know it appeals to a subset of photographers, often of an engineering background, and I say that because I have, amongst my previous careers, an engineering background myself. But always remember, it's what the picture looks like. Now, I've got these prints, and when I've done this print here, I'll go outside. We'll have a look at the prints themselves. Do not expect vast differences, certainly not on a video like this. You just won't see much in the way of differences. Paper choice is a very personal thing. If you have a particular liking for one of these types of paper, go for it. And always remember, the paper is just a bit of gloss on your picture, really. Rubbish picture, rubbish print, no matter what paper you print it on. So I'm going to be using an image I took a few years ago in Ely Cathedral. It's a colour image. I will do another video looking at these for black and white, because it is a different matter if you want to print black and white. I'm just looking at colour here. Now, there are relatively few colour images that I like to print on matte papers. It depends. I do find that for larger prints, matte papers often work well. Now, this one here has a dull sheen. This is Baryta one, has a sort of fairly dull sheen to it. So we'll be able to see a difference with this one. But the actual matte art papers themselves, I'll see if I can get some close-up photos. But seriously, don't expect huge differences. The differences come as much from how you edit your files, your profiles, all sorts of stuff like that. The papers, yeah, that is part of your decision process. But anyway, let's just go this out. Now, I've got it here. I've edited this elsewhere. This particular image, say it's a picture in Ely Cathedral. I'm printing it at A2. I've sized it. I've edited it in Photoshop. It's very simple editing. I've processed the image. I've corrected it using one of the nick tools to make sure the geometry is spot on. I've actually, because it was taken with just a 21 megapixel Canon 1DS Mark III, because it was taken with that, I've enlarged it using gigapixel AI. I've sharpened it with Nick Sharpener, very basic processing, nothing fancy in that. Now, I will at some point go through a step-by-step of what I did, but essentially all I wanted was a picture that I'm happy with printing on paper like this. Now, I've made the settings here. I'm printing it in professional print layout, which I've called in Photoshop as a plugin or as an automated tool. I've set the margins. I did this when I created the image. I knew what size margins I want when I cropped it and everything to fit on an A2 sheet of paper. But anyway, I've set the margins. Color management. I'm using my profile, PermaJet Heritage Baryta Rag 310 Baryta. Baryta is the media setting that I'm using. I mentioned the difference between the media settings depending. I'm using the rear slot. You'll have noticed just how much space I've had to leave at the back of the printer to easily add this paper in. But anyway, here it is. It's set for that. The only other things to make sure of is obviously the size, manual feed tray, the back tray, print quality high. Highest gives no real difference on this. Clear coating is set to auto. Well, it takes about 7.5 minutes to print one of these on high quality. Highest quality, 10-15 minutes or so. Yeah, for a minimal difference. I've not selected borderless or anything like that. Media type, Baryta photo paper, and I just press print. I get a message coming up telling me the details. Worth just quickly checking this. Don't just dismiss it immediately, because I have got things wrong in the past, but I can see that Baryta photo paper, ICC profile, I used the soft proofing to see whether there was any difference between perceptual or relative colorimetric, and I know that this particular image often prints better with a perceptual rendering using mice profiles. So that's what I've got here. Does make a difference. and it's worth experimenting with it. The soft proofing here will give you a general idea of differences. Don't rely on it too much. Get your editing right in the first place. But anyway, if I just click OK on that, printing will start from the manual feed tray, load a sheet of paper, yet done that, start print. Clunky interface, but I've mentioned that elsewhere. So, I did actually time it for one of the earlier prints, and it took, for this particular size, it took just fractionally over 7 minutes to print one of these. So if you're going to get one of these for doing a lot of printing, say you're producing editions of prints or something like that, you might want to consider, oh, it takes a while, usually a minute or so, from anything happening here till the paper going in and starting. And that's a fast laptop. That's a current model MacBook Pro, so it's not the software causing any delays, it's just the whole system is a bit slow. Mind you, it is, if I remember rightly, about an 800 megabyte image. It's a big image. As I said, I resized it. So it's printing probably at about, I think, about 420 pixels per inch. I resized it. Why do I resize it? Well, the resizing, and I tend to do slight adjustments here when I'm doing the resizing, is purely that it helps sharpening for print. I find that if I take an image, resize it bigger, rather than just going for the nominal 300 pixels per inch resolution, if I resize it to a bigger file, because remember, it was only 21 megapixels. Now, I know that 21 megapixel images from the 1DS3 print perfectly well on this. But I have found that processing those images, those raw files, and this one was from 2011, I believe, and it's taken with a shift lens, Canon 24mm TSE 24 tilt shift lens. I know that processing the images here gives you better detail in prints. Now, I've looked at this in other videos and things, and because I've just got on my Mac Studio, I've just updated to the latest versions of the Gigapixel AI and also the other tools that are available. I still use Sharpen AI. I like Sharpen AI, although that's in one of their other packages now. But I find that doing that, sharpening, resizing, a little bit of print sharpening, a little bit of noise reduction, but not too much. Don't crank up the noise reduction on it. A little bit of noise doesn't harm at the fine detail level we're talking about here. But anyway, those are the tools I use for creating it. We'll just let the print run through here. Well, the print's coming out, I would say doesn't exactly zoom out. The print looks good. I mean, I know the image works. I did edit it specially from the raw file again for this, although I have got print versions of this. I find that unless I'm specifically trying to recreate an edition or something and I'm using a ready-made print file, if a file is old enough, raw processing and resizing, sharpening, general processing software has improved quite appreciably in the 13 years since I first took this picture. Now, when you look at, you might think, well, is it really worth doing? It depends. If you're making a big print like this, then it's worth taking the time to do it. It took me perhaps 3/4 of an hour to do the various edits on this. I mean, yes, I was experimenting a bit because I was trying out some updated new versions of software. Incidentally, although I'm using the latest stuff on this, if I was editing this file on my Mac Pro, which is a 2010 Mac Pro, loads of memory, fast graphics, still drives two 32-inch monitors, the same two monitors that are connected to my Mac Studio. If I was using that and I was using an older version of Photoshop, I can't remember I think it's a Photoshop 2020 or something like that. I can't run anything newer. I could do almost all of this stuff on a Mac that was running system 10.15, macOS 10.15, don't know what the name of it is. This one here, the laptop here, and the Mac Studio are running macOS 14. Do not, if you're doing printing, and do stuff from Macs, do not rush out and update your machine to the latest new operating system when there's a major change. I have heard of all sorts of printing issues that people have had with their Macs because they've updated to macOS 15 just because it's there and brand new and shiny. Well, brand new and shiny operating systems are fine for having a play with, but not if you actually want to do anything. I believe Canon are still in the process of bringing out a new driver for this to support it. Same things happens with major releases of Windows. If you want to have the cutting edge, it's not called bleeding edge for nothing. So if you've got a machine and you use it for work or anything like that, and now I do use this one for experimenting, but if you use stuff for work, keep it stable. It's just saves so much hassle. Anyway, it's a nice looking print. It's coming out well. Incidentally, I have just noticed on this print, and in checking the others I did, it's there to a smaller extent. I've got slightly uneven margins in that the margin on this side is slightly larger than the margin on this side. Now, if you were selling prints, that's something to be worried about. Now, I wasn't overly concerned. I should have checked earlier. But when you're setting the margins inside, this is using PPL, Canon's professional print layout. When you're setting margins, if you can do a test on plain paper, albeit I know getting A2 sheets of plain paper is not easy, do a test. If margins are important, and I come across this all the time, sometimes it's because paper is not quite the right size. Certainly that's true with roll paper, but not with sheet normally. This one, I'm noticing that the margin is slightly off. Now, I noticed this on another, and somebody actually spotted it on a picture that I did. Shows people are paying attention, I suppose. But anyway, take care if margins are important to you. Now, for a picture like this, I would put it in a frame. I would put it behind a mat. So as long as there is some margin, it doesn't really matter. That's probably why I don't look at margins with really careful eye. Now, this is a few millimeters difference. You can change that in the settings, in the settings in PPL, but practice. Get some sheets of, I don't know, A3 plain paper or something like that to work out how the margins are affected, how PPL's margin controls. If that's important, you need to do that. Now, I could have printed this borderless. Now, I generally have no use whatsoever for printing large borderless prints, but some people like borderless. You can print borderless. If you want to print borderless, by the way, on other paper, on those art papers, the ones that go in through the back, the fine art smooth, fine art rough, you have to make sure you override the margin defaults. You'll get a warning saying, oh, there are no margins on this particular paper. You shouldn't do this. You can do it. Now, there are some issues with printing on some papers in that I have heard reports of banding and a few other issues with printing with this printer. Now, I don't know whether that's just because they are new printers or whether that's a generic issue. But looking at this one here, I can see no problems with banding or anything. Check carefully if you get one of these printers and you want to use non-standard papers, thicker papers. I've found it even with a thick luster paper using the Pro Luster setting. Print a solid grey block at 80% or thereabout. Run that through as a test for print alignment. You can do feed adjustments, and that is worth doing, but do check carefully before you start printing on large expensive sheets like this that there are no issues with the media that you've picked. Now, I'll come back to this more when I do the proper review, because there's more testing that needs doing for some aspects. But certainly this particular print, looks absolutely fine. Now let's go and have a look at all the prints together. Right, here are the prints. 5 prints made on 80 of the same image. Now, until I actually check the video recording here, we're working with a mix of daylight here. It's now clear blue sky, so I've got a bit of light here to try and balance this. And rather than the lighting in the kitchen there, which is where the printer tests, this is maybe a little bit more variable, so I'll see what I can do to try and make these match as I see them here. But anyway, daylight prints. These are not papers with optical brighteners in, as far as I recall. I will have to check, but there's no obvious difference between them. They're all quite bright white. Can you see which one is the Baryta print from just looking at them there? No, you probably can't. I don't know, maybe it'll show up more on the video, but it's this one here. Now, in terms of the actual papers themselves, I've had to write on the back now what they are. Now, I know from the feel of them, I can feel there's a slight difference in surface texture. Obviously the watercolour one is the roughest surface. Depends a bit on the subject that you're showing. Now this is old stonework here. This stonework is getting on for well over 900 years old. So it's pretty well worn, it's smoothed, it's got texture. That's the sort of image that I would happily print on a matte art paper type. Now the pigment inks of the Pro-1100 here, they are slightly improved over the inks of the older Pro-1000, but for people asking me about scratch resistance and things like that, for all meaningful purposes, they're not that much difference. Now the blacks, the maximum black density may be slightly higher on these ones here. I can see black density, but I'll return to that when I have a look at black and white printing in more detail, because there are a few caveats that come with that deeper black if you're not careful. Certainly if you value shadow detail in your prints, there's a distinct chance that if you try printing with a black and white print mode without checking it or doing things, you will get crunched up shadows, which is a particular annoyance on it. I go to the trouble of actually recording detail in those dark areas sometimes, and I really want to be able to reproduce it in a print. Certainly it makes a difference in some of my interior architectural shots. But these are just straightforward profiles. I mean, I'm looking at them, I can perhaps on a good day see that the colours look perhaps a little, ever so slightly richer on this one. This one here is the Smooth Rag 310. Now, not dissimilar to other Smooth Rag 310 gram papers you may find when you're hunting around the internet. The Baryta doesn't make that much of a difference with this image. Now, with brighter, more colourful images, if I picked a, an outdoor shot with blue sky in it, then the difference, the deeper blacks that you get on this Baryta paper here would show up against these. But certainly for this image here, there's very little difference. Now I can see with this Baryta one that if I look carefully, yeah, there's a slightly richer tone to the colour. It's a very soft sheen to it, so this is not a glossy print. It's barely even luster, but it does definitely have that darker look because it's using the photo black ink rather than the matte black inks in these. So the dynamic range of this paper is greater than the dynamic range of this. Now, because I've profiled them and I've created custom profiles with nearly 3,000 patches, so quite advanced profiling. Because I've profiling, does that mean they should all look the same? Absolutely not. Fundamental mistake people make about profiling is that it is meant so that everything looks the same. You've only got to look at the difference between an image, test image or something like that, printed on matte paper and photo paper, to know that profiling does not make them look the same. There is a lower dynamic range on this. That's the range between paper white and the blackest black you can get. The blackest black on this is slightly darker than these. Now, This also varies. If I was looking at these pictures indoors, there would be other differences in them. That depends on the inks, depends on the papers. Because we aren't troubled by optical brightness here, the fact that I'm doing it outdoors isn't making that much of a difference. But certainly if I did this, if one of these had a lot of optical brightener in it, was a bright white paper, then it would glow. There's enough residual UV coming in here and deep blue light coming from the sky to be able to light up papers like that. So they are gloriously similar. Is that a problem? Well, no, not really, because I picked this image because I wanted an image that worked, a colour image that worked well on this. If you're printing, as I say, if I was an outdoor shot, building, blue sky, clouds, I might want a very different look to that picture to here. Doesn't mean you can't print on matte art papers, but I find that you need to be more careful over the images that work on a paper like this. And ooh, a bit of cloud has just gone by, so you'll notice there'll be a bit of change of colour and things to get on this. But I think you have to be a bit more careful in choosing your images if you want to print on matte art papers like this. But the key is they're all nice papers. These ones are absolutely spotless. This one here, I haven't done a print alignment on this, and looking in real detail in these darker smooth areas, so that's here, you can see the darker on this one here, I can actually see a tiny bit of banding. Now that banding is typically caused by the paper thickness not being, the printer alignment not being there. Now, I wouldn't normally expect to have to do an alignment for a paper like this because these papers are quite thick. That's another issue which I'm going to have a look at. I would say that on this particular print here, I had to look very carefully and actually needed 2 pairs of glasses to be able to see that, but it was there. So just be wary of things like that. But I'm looking at them as a range of papers. They're very nice. These are not budget papers. These are papers for exhibitions. Thanks again to PermaJet for sending me a set of these papers at A2 samples. And that is appreciated. As I say, I cannot afford to buy printers, inks and things like that to test for all this printer testing I do. I appreciate that I'm very lucky in getting this stuff to test. There are not many people going to be able to buy a pack of all of these papers and have a look at them. So if you've got specific questions, let me know while I've got the printer here. I say I'm lucky enough to have ink, paper, a printer to be able to do this. It takes but my time. Well, that's not a trivial matter, but I enjoy doing it. But there you go. PermaJet Heritage range. Have a look at the notes on it. Look at the specifications. That's a UK brand, but have a look at the specifications and you'll see similarities elsewhere. Such is the nature of paper sales. But anyway, that 5 prints, 1 image. The image works well. Which one would I put on the wall? Actually, by the time you've framed it and put it behind glass, I defy most people to be able to spot the difference. What you're seeing is the result of my editing, my colour management in making profiles, my printing skills, editing skills, photography skills. Always remember that before you go too far down the rabbit hole of choosing papers. And when somebody says to you, oh, paper XYZ is absolutely superb, it's what I use for everything. Sure, it's what they use for everything. Doesn't mean you should. Take paper advice under advisement because it is about your tastes. Where I pick one of while doing an exhibition, yeah, I'd be happy to do prints with these if I had the right sort of images that didn't look better on this, or maybe even a gloss or even a metallic paper. It is what works for you. And I say, don't be unduly swayed by people telling you that paper brand XYZ is the absolute tops. There are good ones, there are less good ones, but remember that can come at a cost. So yeah, and practice. Don't forget these margins. If you're doing prints like this and you want the margins spot on, be careful with it. Anyway, I hope that's of interest. Let me know what you think, and onwards and to do some more testing. Thanks for watching, and bye.